The Appalachian camping trip was our sacred ritual. Every May, without fail. It was the one time a year the six of us could completely unplug from jobs, from classes, from the relentless digital hum of modern life. It was supposed to be about crisp mountain air, the satisfying crunch of boots on a dirt trail, and the easy comfort that only comes with lifelong friendships. It was our sanctuary. I have to hold on to that before image because after that weekend the woods don't feel like a sanctuary anymore, they feel like a hunting ground. And it all started with a text message. Now, I was on my bedroom floor, meticulously organizing my gear. My worn hiking boots were next to a fresh pair of wool socks. My headlamp had new batteries. My sleeping bag was fluffed and ready. Leo, my boyfriend of 3 years, was doing the same across the room, humming off-key to some indie rock band while wrestling his tent back into its impossibly small bag. The energy was light, familiar, and perfect. We were the dependable core of the group. Then my phone buzzed on the hardwood, an insistent little vibration that cut through the calm. Mia. Hey, so excited for tomorrow. By the way, I invited someone else to come with us. Smiley face. Her name is Seraphina. She's a new transfer student in my art history class and has no friends yet. She's super cool. You'll love her. See you at the trailhead? XO. I read the message once, then twice. The casual smiley face at the end felt like a slap. An intruder. Our group wasn't just a random collection of people. We were a carefully balanced ecosystem. There was me and Leo, the long-term couple. There was Nate and Sophie, our other couple, who bickered like they were married for 50 years but were the bedrock of every gathering. And there was Ryan, the stoic, quiet gearhead, who spoke more to trees than to people but would give you the shirt off his back. And Mia, the beautiful, impulsive, free-spirited artist who held us all together with her chaotic charm. 6. A perfect, even number for tents and campfire stories. 7 was wrong. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, the words tasting sour. Leo stopped his humming. What's up, Clara? I tossed the phone to him. He read the text, his brow furrowing for a second before smoothing out. Oh, okay. A new person, cool. Cool? Leo, it's our trip. The one thing we have that's just for us. She's bringing a total stranger. My voice was rising, a tight knot of annoyance forming in my chest. This wasn't just a change in plans. It felt like a violation. Babe, it's Mia, he said, ever the diplomat. You know how she is. She collects strays. It'll be fine. What's the big deal? I snatched my phone back and dialed Mia's number, my thumb jabbing at the screen. She answered on the second ring, her voice bubbly and carefree. Clara, hey! Did you get my text? I got it, Mia. What were you thinking? I tried to keep my tone even, but the frustration bled through. You can't just invite a stranger on our annual trip. We have traditions. We have a dynamic. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she laughed, a sound that usually warmed me but now just grated on my nerves. Seraphina is amazing. She's really quiet and smart. A little intense maybe, but I think she just needs to get out and meet people. I felt bad for her. So you invite her to spend 3 days in the middle of the woods with people she's never met? That's not a coffee date, Mia. It's an overnight trip in the mountains. She was all for it. Honestly, I think you'll really like her, Mia insisted. Just give her a chance. For me? I squeezed my eyes shut, rubbing the bridge of my nose. Arguing with Mia was like trying to bottle the wind. She operated on pure emotion and good intentions. Logic be damned. Leo was already shrugging at me, mouthing the words, "Let it go." Fine, I sighed, the word feeling like a surrender. Fine, Mia. But if she's weird, I'm blaming you. She's not weird, Mia chirped, completely missing the genuine unease in my voice. She's just different. See you tomorrow. She hung up before I could say another word. I dropped the phone back onto the floor and stared at my perfectly packed gear. Leo came over and wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "It'll be okay," he murmured into my hair. One more person for s'mores will survive. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to shake off the feeling, to chalk it up to me being overly controlling about our one sacred tradition. But as I looked at our gear, the two-person tent, the food packed for 6, the familiar arrangement of our little world, a cold dread seeped into my bones, a feeling completely at odds with the warm spring evening. I was trying to make space in my head for a 7th person, for a name like Seraphina, but all I could feel was a deep, instinctual certainty. Something was already wrong. The gravel lot at the base of the Laurel Falls Trail was our usual church, the place we gathered before our pilgrimage into the wild. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, a scent that always felt like coming home. Nate and Sophie were already there, leaning against their truck, engaged in a low-stakes argument about whether Nate had packed the good coffee or the cheap instant stuff. Ryan was a few feet away, meticulously adjusting the straps on his pack, his quiet presence, a familiar comfort. The morning sun filtered through the canopy, painting dappled light across the ground. It was perfect. Normal. Then Mia's beat-up Subaru Forester crunched into the lot, a cloud of dust in its wake. She hopped out, a whirlwind of turquoise fleece and braided hair, beaming at us. "We're here!" And then I saw her. The passenger door opened, and Seraphina emerged. She didn't so much get out of the car as appear. She straightened to her full height with an impossibly perfect posture, like a ballerina or a soldier. She was beautiful, I suppose, in a stark, severe way. Jet-black hair was pulled back in a tight, flawless bun, and her features were sharp and symmetrical, her skin as smooth and pale as porcelain. But it was a beauty that belonged in a museum, under glass. It felt cold, curated, and utterly devoid of life. An uncanny valley you could walk right into. As the group exchanged greetings, she stood with an unnatural stillness. Most people fidget, they shift their weight, scratch their nose, check their phone. Seraphina didn't. She was a statue, carved from something colder than stone, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. Her eyes were the most unsettling part. When Leo, ever the friendly ambassador, stepped forward to introduce himself, her gaze landed on him. Her eyes, a pale, washed-out gray, didn't just look at him, they seemed to be cataloging him. They scanned him from head to toe with an intensity that felt less like curiosity and more like data collection. "Hey, Seraphina, I'm Leo." "Great to meet you," he said, extending a hand. She looked at his offered hand for a fraction of a second before meeting his eyes again. She didn't take it. "It is a pleasure to be included," she said. Her voice was a low, even monotone, each word enunciated with crystalline precision. There was no warmth, no inflection. It was like listening to a GPS navigator. She went through the introductions with the same chilling formality. A nod for Nate and Sophie. A brief, analytical stare for Ryan. When she finally turned to me, I felt a pinprick of ice travel down my spine. "Clara," she stated, not as a question, but as a confirmation. "Mia has spoken of you." I just nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Welcome." The hike began, and any hope I had that she might loosen up on the trail evaporated within the first mile. We fell into our usual rhythm, Sophie complaining good-naturedly about the incline, Nate teasing her, Leo cracking a terrible pun about bears that made me groan, and Ryan occasionally pointing out a bird or a type of fungus. We were a symphony of casual, comfortable humanity, labored breathing, the scuff of a misplaced boot, the rustle of a jacket. Seraphina was a machine. She moved with a robotic, metronomic grace. Her pace never varied, not by a single fraction. Whether the path was flat or a steep, rocky scramble, her high-end, brand-new pack sat perfectly square on her shoulders, never shifting. While the rest of us were starting to show a healthy sheen of sweat, her porcelain skin remained matte and dry. Her breathing was an inaudible, steady hum. She didn't seem to be hiking so much as gliding over the terrain, an effortless, silent wraith in our midst. Ryan, in a rare burst of conversation, pointed to a hawk circling high above us. "Red-tailed hawk," he said. a note of appreciation in his voice. Seraphina's head tilted, tracking the bird's movement with predatory focus. "Ah," she said, her voice cutting through the mountain air. "Buteo gematsensis. A common raptor in this region. Its wingspan can reach 130 centimeters." The comment hung in the air, clinical and strange. Ryan just grunted and fell silent, the moment of shared wonder completely dismantled. The final nail in the coffin of my composure came about an hour later. We were navigating a tricky, root-latticed section of the trail when Nate, distracted by something Sophie said, caught his toe and went down, tumbling forward with a loud grunt. It happened in a split second. A gasp went through our group. I lurched forward. Leo reached out an arm. It's instinct. You see someone fall, you react. Everyone reacted, except Seraphina. She was the closest to him, no more than 2 feet away. She didn't flinch. She didn't move to help. She didn't even blink. She simply stopped, her head cocked slightly, and watched him hit the dirt with the same detached, analytical curiosity she'd shown the hawk. Nate pushed himself up, laughing it off. "Whoa, clumsy. All good, guys." Seraphina's gray eyes remained fixed on him. "Your center of gravity was compromised by the uneven terrain," she observed flatly. It wasn't an expression of concern. It was a diagnosis. A system error report. I stared at her, at the absolute void of emotion on her perfect face. The annoyance I'd felt last night was gone, replaced by a deep, primal sense of wrongness. This wasn't social awkwardness. This wasn't a cultural difference. This was a complete and utter absence of something fundamentally human. And in that moment, I knew with a certainty that chilled me more than the mountain air, the person Mia brought with us wasn't just weird. She wasn't one of us. We found a clearing just as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. The spot was familiar, a small, flat meadow fringed by whispering pines that we'd claimed on at least 2 previous trips. Setting up camp was a practiced dance of organized chaos. Tents were unrolled, poles were snapped into place, and Nate got a small, crackling fire going with the expert efficiency of someone who'd rather be doing that than anything else. For a moment, things felt normal again. I laughed as Leo struggled with a stubborn tent zipper, and Sophie tossed me a bag of marshmallows. The familiar rhythm was soothing, a balm on the strange tension from the hike. Seraphina, however, operated on a different frequency. Her tent, a sleek, dark gray dome, was erected in under 2 minutes with a series of silent, fluid movements. There was no fumbling, no muttered curses, no asking for help. It simply materialized, perfect and severe, a stark monolith among our colorful, slightly mismatched gear. The moment it happened, the moment that tipped me from unease into genuine fear, was small, almost unnoticeable. I was helping Mia drive the last stake for her tent's rainfly. I held the stake in place while she fumbled for the mallet. "Hand me that stake, would you, Clara?" Mia asked, pointing to one by Seraphina's feet. I reached for it, but Seraphina was faster. She bent down with that same unnerving grace and picked it up. As she passed it to me, her fingers brushed against the back of my hand. A jolt, cold and electric, shot up my arm. Her skin. It wasn't just cold from the cooling mountain air. It was a deep, internal cold, the kind of cold that doesn't belong in a living thing. And the texture, it was utterly wrong. Smooth, yes, but too smooth. Poreless. It felt like touching the skin of a high-end silicone doll, resilient, vaguely yielding, and completely terrifyingly fake. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned, the metal stake clattering to the ground. "Sorry," I mumbled, my heart hammering against my ribs. Seraphina just tilted her head, her pale gray eyes registering my reaction without a flicker of emotion. "It is of no consequence," she said in her flat, precise tone, before turning and walking back toward her perfect tent. Mia hadn't noticed. No one had. I picked up the stake, my own skin still tingling with the phantom sensation of that cold, synthetic touch. Later, as darkness settled and the campfire became our universe, the strangeness only intensified. We passed around steaming bowls of chili and grilled hot dogs on sharpened sticks. Everyone dug in with the ravenous appetite that only a long hike can produce. Everyone except Seraphina. She accepted a bowl from Leo, but one watched her from across the fire. For 20 minutes, she did nothing but stir the contents with her spoon, a slow, circular motion that was mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. She never took a single bite. She did, however, drink. She had a large metallic canteen from which she drank with a steady, almost obsessive regularity. While the rest of us were sipping on beer or hot chocolate, she was consuming water, just water, with the methodical rhythm of a machine being refueled. Sophie, bless her direct and guileless heart, tried to bridge the gap. "So Seraphina, Mia said you're a transfer student. Where'd you study before this?" Seraphina lowered her canteen. The firelight danced across her impassive features. "My previous institution was located in a different climate zone. The curriculum was insufficient for my long-term objectives." The answer was a perfect wall. It sounded intelligent but said absolutely nothing. "Oh, cool," Sophie pressed, undeterred. "And your family? Are they still back there?" A silence fell over our small circle, thick and heavy. Seraphina's gaze didn't waver. "My progenitors are not a subject of frequent discussion. Their influence on my current path is negligible." "What about your family, Sophie? Your mother is a librarian, is she not? That must provide access to a significant repository of information." The deflection was masterful. Sophie, caught off guard, stammered for a moment before launching into a story about her mom. Seraphina had effortlessly turned the spotlight away, leaving us all with the distinct impression that her past wasn't just private, it was a void. The conversation eventually moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I sat there, nursing a lukewarm hot chocolate, my eyes fixed on the woman who had so completely shattered our sanctuary. The fire had burned down to a bed of glowing embers, casting long, dancing shadows. Seraphina was staring into the embers, her posture as still as ever. For a long moment, everything was quiet except for the crackle of the coals and the distant sigh of the wind. Then she looked up, her gaze sweeping across the campsite, and her eyes met mine. And I saw it. For a single horrifying second, as the dying firelight caught her eyes, they didn't reflect the light. They produced their own. A faint but unmistakable phosphorus glow, a greenish-gold shimmer from deep within her pupils. It was the cold, predatory glint of a nocturnal hunter, the alien luminescence of a deep-sea creature. It was the look of something that was not, and had never been, human. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The light was gone as quickly as it appeared, her eyes returning to their flat, pale gray. I glanced at Leo, then at Mia. They were laughing at something Nate said, completely oblivious. They hadn't seen it. It was just for me. A secret, a threat, a promise. My blood ran cold, and I knew, with a certainty that eclipsed all reason, that we were in terrible, terrible danger. Sleep was a distant country I had no hope of visiting. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that unnatural, phosphorescent glow in Seraphina's pupils. The campfire had died completely, plunging our clearing into a profound darkness broken only by a sliver of moon. The cheerful sounds of our group had been replaced by the soft snores of Leo beside me and the gentle rustle of wind in the pines. But it wasn't peaceful. The silence felt heavy, charged with the presence of the woman in the dark gray tent just 20 feet away. I couldn't breathe. The air in our tent felt thick and stale, suffocating me with my own paranoia. I had to get out. "I'm just going to the bathroom," I whispered, carefully unzipping the tent door. Leo shifted in his sleep but didn't wake. I slipped out into the frigid night air, the cold, a welcome shock to my system. Armed with my headlamp, I walked to the edge of the clearing and moved just beyond the tree line, needing the illusion of privacy and a moment to clear my head. The woods at night were usually a place of quiet reverence for me, a tapestry of familiar sounds, the hoot of a distant owl, the scuttling of some small creature in the undergrowth. But tonight, another sound bled through the natural chorus. It was faint at first, a rhythmic, unnatural cadence. I clicked off my headlamp, plunging myself into darkness to listen more intently. It wasn't an animal. It was a series of sharp, wet clicks, like pebbles striking glass, interspersed with low, guttural chittering. The sound was complex, structured. It was a language. My blood ran cold. It was coming from deeper in the woods, away from the campsite. Driven by a terrifying need to confirm what I already suspected, I began to move toward the source, my feet sinking silently into the soft pine needles on the forest floor. I found her in a small, moon-dappled glade about 50 yards from our camp. Seraphina was standing perfectly still, her back to me, her head tilted up towards the canopy as if addressing the stars. The clicking, guttural sounds were coming from her. It was a fluid, horrifying stream of non-human speech, a sound that scraped at the primitive parts of my brain and screamed wrong. I stood frozen behind the trunk of a massive oak, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. She wasn't talking on a phone. There was no one else there. She was speaking into the empty air, communicating with something unseen. My foot landed on a dry twig. It snapped with a sound that seemed as loud as a gunshot in the silent woods. The clicking stopped instantly. With a slowness that was more terrifying than any sudden movement, Seraphina turned. Her body rotated as a single unit, her head and shoulders moving in perfect unison. Her face was a pale mask in the moonlight, her expression utterly blank. She saw me. What was that? The words tumbled out of my mouth, a weak, trembling accusation. What were you doing? She took a step toward me, her movements silent and predatory. You should not be out here alone, Clara. The forest can be disorienting at night. Don't, I hissed, taking a step back. Don't pretend I didn't hear you. That sound? It wasn't human. Her head tilted, that same bird-like analytical gesture. Sound is merely vibration. The interpretation is subjective. You are tired. Your senses are easily deceived. Her calm, clinical gaslighting was more infuriating than any denial. It was you. I heard it. It sounded like clicks, like an insect. A flicker of something, not emotion, but a cold, calculating intelligence, passed through her pale eyes. She gave a smile that didn't touch them, a chilling baring of teeth. There are many forms of communication in the universe, Clara, she said, her voice a low, condescending hum. Not all are meant for your ears. She held my gaze for another long second, a silent challenge, before she turned and walked past me, gliding back toward the campsite without another word. I was left alone in the glade, trembling, my paranoia now cemented into a terrifying certainty. Shaken, I stumbled back to my tent and crawled inside, zipping it shut as if that thin layer of nylon could protect me. Leo was still sound asleep. I lay there, rigid in my sleeping bag, staring at the dark ceiling of the tent. I was alone in this. No one would believe me. They'd say I was tired, that I was being dramatic, that I never wanted Seraphina to come in the first place. And that's when the second sound began. It started as a low hum, a faint vibration I felt more in my teeth than my ears. It grew steadily, rising in pitch until it was a high-frequency buzz. A swarm. My mind immediately went to mosquitoes, but I shoved the thought away. It was far too cold for them, and this sound was too massive, too overwhelming. It wasn't the sound of a few dozen insects. It was the sound of tens of thousands, a living, vibrating cloud of them, and it was right outside. The buzzing enveloped our tent, a solid wall of sound that was both everywhere and nowhere. It seemed to be coming from all directions at once, a high-pitched thrum that made the very air feel thick and alive. I pressed my ear against the tent wall, expecting to hear the frantic tapping of tiny bodies against the fabric. There was nothing. Just the impossible, deafening hum in the air outside the nylon. Kilpico. I squeezed my eyes shut, my hands clamped over my ears, but I couldn't block it out. It felt like the sound was trying to get in, to seep through the fabric and into my head. It was the sound of a million tiny wings beating in the cold mountain air, a sound that had no right to exist. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that rushed in was absolute, leaving a painful ringing in my ears. The world outside was once again still, but I knew it wasn't empty. They were out there. Whatever she had been speaking to, it had answered. And it was waiting. I woke to the brutal morning light with a pounding headache and a deep, aching chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. My body felt heavy and slow, my joints protesting every movement. Leo was already up, his voice a cheerful murmur outside the tent. The impossible buzzing from the night before felt like a fever dream, but the terror it left behind was viscerally real. "Morning, sleepyhead," Leo said, poking his head through the tent flap. His smile faltered as he saw my face. "Whoa, Clara, you look awful." "I feel awful," I croaked. My throat was raw, and a wave of nausea rolled through me. As I pushed myself into a sitting position, a sharp, stinging pain flared on the side of my neck. I reached up and my fingers found a hard, swollen welt, easily the size of a quarter. It was hot to the touch and pulsed with a dull, throbbing ache. "What the hell?" I muttered, trying to crane my neck to see it. "Let me see," Leo said, leaning in. His eyes widened. "Dude, that's the biggest mosquito bite I've ever seen. It's huge." "Mosquitoes?" "Leo, it was 40 degrees last night." My own words from the night before echoed back at me. Mia's voice called out from her tent. "Oh my God, me too! I have one on my arm." She emerged, rubbing a similar-looking red, angry swelling on her bicep. "It hurts like a bitch." A cold dread washed over me. I looked at Leo. "Do you have any?" He shook his head, then paused. "Actually, my back feels a little itchy." He twisted, pulling up the back of his t-shirt. There, just above his waistband, was another one. Identical. A swollen, inflamed circle of skin. Nate, Sophie, and Ryan were fine. Untouched. It was just the three of us, the occupants of the two tents closest to where Seraphina's silent, gray monolith was pitched. My gaze snapped to her. She was standing by the dead fire pit, observing us. While I was shivering and Mia was wincing in pain, Seraphina was a picture of perfect composure. There was no concern on her face, no sympathy. Instead, she watched us with that same disturbing clinical detachment she'd shown when Nate fell. "Those appear to be localized inflammatory reactions," she stated, her voice cutting through the morning chatter. She took a step closer, her pale eyes examining the bite on Mia's arm with unnerving focus. "Likely from a species of Culicidae adapted to colder climates. The swelling is a histamine response to the anticoagulant proteins in its saliva. It is a fascinating biological event." Fascinating. We were in pain, and she was narrating a nature documentary. "Whatever it is, I feel like crap," I said, my voice sharp with accusation. I felt feverish now, a dizzying heat behind my eyes. "I think we should pack up. I want to go home." "Oh, Clara, don't be like that," Mia said, her voice strangely placid. She was usually the first to panic over a paper cut. Now she just rubbed her arm with a kind of detached annoyance. "It's just a bug bite. Seraphina's right. We shouldn't let it ruin the best day of the trip." I stared at her, then at Leo. He was looking at his own bite in our small hand mirror, but his expression wasn't one of alarm. It was one of mild curiosity. "Mia's right, babe," he said, his tone a little too calm, a little too reasonable. "We came all this way. It's a beautiful day for a long hike. The view from the summit is supposed to be incredible." Something was wrong with them. Their usual reactions were muted. Their personalities sanded down to a strange, docile compliance. It was like their emotional responses had been unplugged. "Are you kidding me?" I pleaded, looking from Leo's placid face to Mia's. "I feel like I have the flu. I can barely stand up." Seraphina stepped forward, placing a cool hand on Leo's shoulder. I flinched, remembering the feel of that synthetic skin. The venom from such bites can sometimes have a mild, temporary euphoric effect to pacify the host, she said smoothly. It masks the initial discomfort. A walk would be beneficial. The increased circulation will help metabolize the foreign proteins. Clara can remain here and rest. We wouldn't want to exacerbate her condition. Her words were a silken trap. She wasn't just explaining their behavior, she was directing it. And they were listening. "Yeah, that's a great idea," Leo said, turning to me with a vacant smile. "You stay here, get some rest. We'll go see the summit and be back in a few hours. We'll bring you back a cool picture." He was talking to me like a child. Leo, who would normally cancel the entire trip if I so much as sneezed. "No," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of sickness and rage. "No, you're not leaving me here alone with her." I shot a venomous glare at Seraphina, who met my gaze with unnerving calm. But Seraphina wasn't staying. "On the contrary, Clara," she said. "The fresh air will do me good as well. I will accompany them." She turned to the now docile Leo and Mia, her voice shifting into a subtle command. "We should pack light. Just water and a nutrient paste. We will move quickly." And just like that, it was decided. Nate and Sophie, seeing a consensus, shrugged and started prepping their day packs. Ryan was already prepared. My protests were ignored, dismissed as the grumblings of someone feeling unwell. Leo gave me a quick, passionless kiss on the forehead. His lips felt cool, and promised to be back by late afternoon. I watched them go, a small procession disappearing into the trees. Leo and Mia walked with a strange, almost listless gait, their movements lacking their usual energy. Seraphina walked beside them, a shepherd guiding her placid flock. Apata! The clearing fell silent. I was alone, shivering with fever, my body aching. But the physical sickness was nothing compared to the ice-cold terror gripping my heart. She had done something to them, and she had left me here on purpose. Weak, isolated, and defenseless. The silence of the empty campsite was a roaring in my ears. The fever was worse now, a disorienting fog that made the trees seem to sway and breathe. My body was a battleground of shivering chills and waves of sweat. Every beat of my heart sent a painful throb through the swollen welt on my neck. I was sick, weaker than I had ever been, but beneath the illness, a core of pure, undiluted adrenaline was burning. She left me here for a reason. And I was not going to be a passive victim. Weaker, my eyes fell on the dark gray tent, Seraphina's tent. The source of it all. Weaker, fueled by a desperate, feverish energy, I crawled out of my sleeping bag and stumbled across the clearing. The tent's zipper was cold to the touch. I hesitated for only a second, my fear warring with my need to know. The need to know won. I pulled the zipper, the sound ripping through the quiet air like a scream, and ducked inside. The interior was as sterile and unnerving as its owner. There was no clutter. A single, perfectly rolled sleeping bag lay on one side. A metallic canteen, identical to the one she drank from last night, was next to it, but it was the object on the other side that drew my eye. It was a notebook. Black, leather-bound, and utterly plain. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The paper was smooth and thin, almost like vellum. The first few pages were filled with writing, but it wasn't a language I recognized. It was a series of complex geometric symbols and precise, spidery script, arranged in neat, emotionless lines. Alien characters, cold and mathematical. It was the written form of the clicking, guttural sounds I'd heard in the woods. I flipped through the pages, my breath catching in my throat. Then I saw it. Tucked between the pages of alien script were annotations, written in the same precise hand, but this time in chillingly familiar English. They were labels. Diagrams. My eyes scanned the page. There was a crude but detailed drawing of an insect, something like a cross between a mosquito and a wasp, with a long, needle-like proboscis. Next to it, the word injector. Below that, a diagram of a human circulatory system with arrows pointing to major arteries. Then the words. Cold, scientific, horrifying. Host acquisition, vessel preparation. Incubation period, 12 to 18 hours, climate dependent, neurolarval agent deployed. Initial symptoms, fever, localized swelling, docile temperament, suggestibility. My blood turned to ice. I flipped the page. There was a more detailed drawing of a human head and neck, with a cluster of symbols pointing directly to the brainstem. Next to it, a single terrifying word, integration. This wasn't a journal, it was a manual, a field guide for a parasite. Wantraga. My fever-addled brain struggled to process the full horror. The bites. The buzzing. Leo and Mia's placid, empty smiles. It all clicked into place, a picture so monstrous I could barely comprehend it. We weren't just bitten. We were infected. We were hosts. A sound from outside the tent jolted me back to the present. Voices. They were back. Far sooner than they should have been. Panic seized me. I shoved the notebook back where I found it, scrambled out of the tent, and zipped it shut just as the group emerged from the tree line. I tried to look normal, leaning against a tree as if I'd just been getting some air. But they could see it. They had to see the terror on my face. It must be do. They didn't. Leo and Mia still had that placid, disconnected look. They moved with a slow, languid grace that wasn't their own. Nate and Sophie looked tired, confused by the strange, abbreviated hike. Seraphina was watching me, her pale eyes narrowed with a new intensity. She knew. She knew I had been in her tent. The summit view was obscured by cloud cover. Seraphina announced to no one in particular. An inefficient use of energy. We returned. Leo walked past me without a word, his eyes unfocused, and sat down heavily by the fire pit. I reached out a hand to him. Leo, are you okay? He didn't respond. He just stared into the empty space where the fire had been. It was then that I heard her voice, low and conspiratorial, not meant for me. She was speaking to Nate, who looked deeply uncomfortable. The transfer is proceeding as projected in vessels L and M, she said, her voice the cold, flat tone of a scientist delivering a report. The integration is nearly complete. They will be stable for the next phase. Vessels L and M, Leo and Mia. My heart stopped. What the hell are you talking about? Nate demanded, his voice shaky. What transfer? They've been acting weird all morning. Seraphina's gaze flicked from Nate to me, a predator deciding which target to address first. She settled on me. Vessel C, however, she continued, her voice dropping lower, colder, is demonstrating resistance. The fever indicates a hyperactive immune response. The larval agent may not be sufficient. She took a step toward me. Direct intervention will be required. The world tilted on its axis. Direct intervention. The words echoed the sterile horror of the notebook. This wasn't happening. It was a nightmare, a fever dream. I backed away, stumbling toward my tent. "Stay away from me!" I shrieked, my voice cracking with hysteria. I scrambled inside and zipped the flap shut, my body shaking uncontrollably. I could hear Nate shouting outside, confused and angry. "What did you do to them? What did you do to Clara?" Then, a new voice cut through the chaos. It came from right outside my tent, a sound that was both Seraphina's and something more. It was her monotone, but layered beneath it was a low, resonant hum, a chittering, insectoid echo that vibrated through the ground. The voice was a chorus, an unholy harmony of human mimicry and alien command. "Vessel C." The layered voice vibrated, seeming to come from all directions at once. "Exit the habitat. Your incubation requires adjustment." The command was not a request. The layered, inhuman voice vibrated through the thin nylon of the tent, through the ground, and into my very bones. It was a sound that bypassed reason and spoke directly to the primal instinct to obey. My hand, trembling, moved toward the zipper against my will. I fought it, a silent, screaming war inside my own body, but my muscles were betraying me, twitching with a horrifying, alien puppetry. "No," I whimpered, the sound barely a whisper. Outside, Nate's voice rose in panic. "Seraphina, what's happening to your voice? What the hell is going on?" There was a wet, sickening thud, followed by a choked gasp. Then, Sophie's scream, a raw, ragged sound of pure terror that was cut off with an abrupt, gurgling finality. My blood froze. The fight in my limbs vanished, replaced by a paralysis so complete I couldn't even breathe. "Resistance is an inefficient expenditure of resources," the layered voice stated, its calm finality more terrifying than any shout. "The collective requires compliance." My tent flap was ripped open. Not unzipped, ripped. Torn from top to bottom, as if by a giant claw. I scrambled backward, pressing myself against the far wall, my eyes wide with the horror that had no name. The scene in the clearing was a tableau from a fevered nightmare. Ryan lay motionless on the ground near the fire pit, his neck bent at an impossible angle. Nate was on his knees, his hands clutching at his throat where a dark, glistening appendage, a chitinous, serrated leg, was embedded. He was staring at Sophie, who lay beside him, her eyes wide and vacant, a similar wound in her chest. The appendage was connected to Mia, or what was left of her. She stood with that same listless, vacant expression, but her right arm was no longer her own. It had split open at the shoulder, peeling back skin and muscle to reveal a segmented, insectoid limb, twitching and clicking as it retracted from Nate's throat. Nate collapsed sideways, his body convulsing once before falling still. My gaze snapped to Leo. He was standing beside Mia, a matching puppet in this grotesque theater. His eyes, my Leo's kind, warm eyes, were milky and unfocused. He looked at me, but he didn't see me. He was just a shell, a vessel waiting for a command. And then there was Seraphina. She stood at the center of the massacre, her porcelain face devoid of any expression. She watched the unfolding horror with the detached satisfaction of a scientist observing a successful experiment. "You see, Clara," she said, and this time her voice was only her own, a clinical, explanatory monotone that was somehow the most obscene sound of all. "The individual consciousness is so fragile, so prone to fear and rebellion. It must be streamlined, integrated into a greater purpose." As she spoke, she raised a hand toward Leo. "Vessel L," the layered, commanding voice returned, seeming to emanate from her without her lips moving. "Begin the transfer." Leo's body began to shudder violently. It was not a human tremor. It was a mechanical, seismic shaking. A low, tearing sound began, the sound of stitches ripping, of fabric giving way. A dark line appeared down the center of his chest, splitting his shirt open. Then it split his skin. Harobia! I couldn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat, a solid ball of terror. Leo's chest cracked open like a grisly chrysalis. It wasn't blood and bone that spilled out, but a cascade of shimmering, black, carapaced insects pouring onto the ground like a river of obsidian. From the gaping cavity in my boyfriend's torso, something began to unfurl. Long, jointed legs, glistening and black, unfolded first, followed by a narrow, segmented thorax. The head rose last, turning to face me. It was a nightmare fusion of insect and nightmare, with multifaceted eyes that shimmered with 1,000 tiny reflections of my own terrified face, and twitching antennae that tasted the air. The creature stood tall, easily 7 feet, using Leo's split, hollowed-out body as a grotesque frame, a mere shed skin. Seraphina's physical form, the pale girl with the black bun, flickered like a bad projection and then dissolved into motes of light that were absorbed into the creature's towering, insectoid form. She was never real. She was a psychic lure, an avatar, Ava. The creature, Seraphina's true self, let out a deafening chitter, a sound that was both the clicking from the woods and the buzzing from the night, amplified 1,000 times. The swarm on the ground surged forward, overwhelming the bodies of Nate, Sophie, and Ryan. Their flesh writhed and contorted as the insects burrowed in, a horrifying, living tide, converting the dead into new hosts. In the midst of the carnage, the creature turned its full attention to me, its massive, multifaceted eyes locked onto mine. The layered voice echoed directly inside my skull, no longer needing the air to travel. A flawed vessel, it resonated, a thought more than a sound. But the genetic material is compatible. You will not host the collective. You will feed it. One of its long, serrated forelimbs lifted, pointing at me. The tip dripped with a clear, viscous fluid. The world swam, the edges of my vision blurring and darkening. The fever, the terror, the sheer biological impossibility of what I was seeing. It was all too much. My body, finally giving up, went limp. As darkness consumed me, the last thing I saw was the monstrous, insectoid god, born from the body of the man I loved, taking a silent, graceful step toward my paralyzed form. My first conscious sensation was the sterile scent of antiseptic and the rhythmic, electronic beep of a machine. The world returned to me not in a rush, but as a slow, painful bleed of muted white light and hushed voices. I was in a hospital bed, an IV tube taped to the back of my hand. The sheets were crisp and cool against my skin. For a blissful, fleeting second, I thought it had all been a nightmare. Then I moved my head, and the searing pain in my neck, a deep, surgical ache, brought it all crashing back. The clearing, the buzzing, Leo's body splitting open. The creature. I let out a strangled cry, a raw, animal sound that brought a nurse rushing to my side. Rue. They told me I was found by park rangers. A routine patrol had stumbled upon the campsite. They found me unconscious, half in and half out of my torn tent, running a dangerously high fever. They said I was the sole survivor. Survivor. The word felt like a lie, a cruel joke. I hadn't survived. I had simply been left behind. The official story, the one they repeated to me in soothing, patronizing tones, was a neat and tidy package of tragedy. A rare, aggressive fungus native to that specific mountain hollow, they claimed. It released a powerful neurotoxin. Inhaled in large quantities, it induced vivid hallucinations, extreme paranoia, and violent psychosis. A classic case of group hysteria, the lead detective told me, his face a mask of professional pity. A tragic accident. Nate, Sophie, and Ryan had died from injuries sustained during a violent, toxin-fueled altercation. Mia and Leo, they said, had fled into the wilderness in their deranged state and were presumed to have succumbed to the elements. Their bodies were never found. I tried to tell them. Lying in that sterile bed, my voice hoarse and weak, I told them about Seraphina, about the notebook, the buzzing, the impossible creature that wore my boyfriend's skin like a coat. Ode. They just nodded. The doctor called it fever dreams. The detective called it trauma-induced confabulation. They had an answer for everything. The strange, swollen bites, an allergic reaction to a common beetle, exacerbated by the neurotoxin. The fact that I was the only one left alive? A fluke, a miracle. My own severe allergic reaction, they explained, had likely caused my body to violently purge the larvae they had surgically removed from the infected tissue in my neck. My sickness had saved me. They showed me the pictures of the larvae in a sterile plastic dish. Tiny, maggot-like things. They looked nothing like the injector from the notebook, but I knew what they were. The seeds of the colony. Physically, I healed. The fever broke. The incision on my neck became a thin, pink scar, a permanent reminder under my skin. They released me from the hospital into the suffocating care of my grieving parents, who treated me like a fragile piece of glass. They tiptoed around the subject of Leo, of our friends, of the camping trip that had stolen my life. They believed the official story. It was easier, saner, but my mind is a ruin. I don't sleep. When I do, I dream of multifaceted eyes and chittering whispers. I see Leo's hollowed-out body in every shadow. I hear Sophie's final scream on the wind. The woods, once my sanctuary, are now a place of absolute terror on a map, a territory I can never visit again. The doctors have me on medication. For PTSD, they say. For anxiety. It dulls the edges of the world, but it can't touch the core of the horror, the certainty that lives in my bones. I know what I saw. I know that the neurotoxin wasn't a fungus. It was a weapon, a tool for pacifying hosts. I know that Leo and Mia aren't lost in the woods. They are part of the woods. They are vessels walking, breathing incubators, helping the colony spread. Nah, Leo, I live in a new reality now, a world with a terrible secret hiding just beneath its surface. I see the world through a fractured lens. A swarm of gnats by a streetlight makes my heart seize. The buzz of a refrigerator sounds like the beginning of the swarm. And sometimes, in the dead of night when the house is silent and the medication has worn thin, I hear it. It's not a memory. It's a faint, layered whisper that seems to emanate from the darkest corner of my room. It's a voice that is both Seraphina's and something more, a psychic echo carried on the air. Flawed vessel, it hums, a promise and a threat. The collective is patient. The collective is expanding. They call me a survivor, but they're wrong. I'm just the one who got away. I am the witness. And I know, with a certainty that is slowly driving me mad, that it's still out there. And one day, it will come back to finish the harvest.